Cooks and swordsmen have totally different jobs, but we both make our living by the blade. This is one of many interesting quotes that have inspired this controversial theory. This dialogue from Zoro is from Sanji's Food Wars spin-off manga, following a series of side stories focused on Sanji honing his skills in the culinary arts. This specific chapter focuses on an interesting storyline where Sanji is having trouble with cutting a very tough fish with a regular chef's knife, and as a skeptical chef doubts Sanji's ability, Zoro reminds him that Sanji is a chef that lives by the blade. Zoro is then so determined to prove the doubtful chef wrong that he even lets Sanji borrow Wado Ichimonji to use as a substitute kitchen knife, and lo and behold, Sanji wields Wado with such finesse and precision that he cuts the fish to perfection with a single swing. Now this profound moment sparked an idea. Would Sanji ever use a sword like Wado in serious combat? And yes, I know he used kitchen knives before against Wanzei in Eni's lobby, but this was merely due to a technicality of him being in a kitchen. But would he use a real sword without the technicality of cutting food? Would he cut a person? Now the idea may seem like it would ignore all of his principles, but upon really racking my brain about it, I've discovered that not only is it possible, but I found strong evidence that Oda is preparing Sanji to fight with a sword in the very near future in Elbaf. But before I explain why, make sure to like and subscribe if you're already enjoying where the theory is heading. Okay, now let's begin by addressing the elephant in the room. I know you may be thinking, hey Middleway, using a sword is against Sanji's principles. He would never do such a thing. See, that, my friend, is exactly the whole point of this theory. It's exactly because it is against everything he stands for is the reason why it will occur. The basis of this theory is that Sanji is slowly losing his emotions, and him using a sword will be the biggest indicator that he has fully switched. Let me explain. It all goes back to the emotionless soldier storyline. Back in Wano during Sanji's genetic mutations, Sanji began to unlock powers just like his siblings. The exoskeleton, the enhanced regeneration, and the super strength. Despite these major upgrades, the only thing on Sanji's mind was the possibility that he may get the last and most problematic Germa upgrade, an unfailing Heart of Ice. Lucky for him in Wano, it seemed like he was able to avoid this part of the mutation, or should I say postpone this part of the mutation. See, lately, Sanji has been showing signs of trending towards that route. The first sign occurs back in Egghead when he was fighting against S-Shark. After S-Shark almost hurt Nami, Sanji came in and kicked him with a devastating flying kick. In the middle of that kick, Sanji was having some questionable dialogue. Something along the lines of, if I ruled the country, my decrees would be simple. That's weird, right? When did Sanji ever want to rule a country? As far as we know, his relationship with royalty has not always been the best. Okay, let's look at what he says next. I don't give a damn if you're a kid or Jinbei, I'll be your judge, jury, and executioner. Now, this is a lot to unpack. First of all, the initial I don't give a damn if you're a kid is very unlike Sanji. Throughout the story, Sanji has been especially kind to kids and have saved kids like Momo, Tama, and Bonnie when they are in dire need of help. The idea that he wouldn't care if any enemy is a kid is very out of character. Then he just goes completely off the rails with the other lines. He calls himself an executioner. That's crazy because no Straw Hat, let alone Sanji, has ever expressed the intention of killing anyone despite them being an enemy. Now the absolute worst thing here is Sanji directly referring to himself as a judge. The word Sanji and judge should be nowhere near each other. This is when I had a terrible realization. It's possible that every time Sanji switches on his eyebrows, he is getting closer and closer to becoming an emotionless soldier. This hypothesis is then validated when he does it again in Elbaf as well. Against a cat this time, Sanji promises once again to execute anyone who harms Nami. I mean, I get it, you love Nami, but never in history has Sanji repeatedly professed to want to kill people on multiple occasions. Now let's take this into consideration. If Sanji's German personality allows his morality to be stretched that much, it's very possible that this will stretch into him using his hands in battle or doing other things that he otherwise wouldn't do. Like using a sword. But now that we've broken down the narrative groundwork for Sanji becoming evil and using a sword, let's actually break down how it will happen in the current context of the story, as well as why Oda is choosing to do this now on Elbaf. The how is actually the most simple answer. Think about it. What power has been recently introduced that turns allies into evil versions of themselves? That's right, Domi Reversi. Imu's demonic contract that grants users immense power just in exchange for a wee bit of lifespan. I know at first the idea that Sanji may fall victim to this technique may sound controversial, but you can't deny the possibility. In the latest chapters, Sanji is already on his way with Zoro to the Sun World where Imu will be. And get this, they're going without Loki or Luffy. So this means the wings of the Pirate King are going to be going against Imu and the Holy Knights practically alone, at least until Luffy gets back, which leaves both as fair game and vulnerable to be turned by a Domi Reversi by Imu. Now, it's important to disclaim that I don't think Imu is going to succeed in Sanji's full demonic reversal, but I do think she's strong enough to influence his Germicide to come to the surface. Ultimately, I believe Sanji will overcome this in some way. Some would say Conqueror's Haki, but hey, maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me. On a serious note though, my last theory goes over demonic contracts and how to overcome them, so check that out when you get the chance. This may be relevant in this theory. Overall, I believe the how of Sanji becoming evil is simple. Now let's dive into why. Why now has Oda chose to climax this emotionless soldier storyline up until the point where Sanji uses a sword and gets Domi Reversi'd? Well, I believe Oda has been waiting for a moment where Sanji losing his emotions is narratively most impactful. And that would be Elbaf. As we see, the name of the game of Elbaf is switching people to one side or the other. We've also seen some major themes of the power of love through Gaban versus the power of evil through Imu. Imu quite literally says to Broggy that he will grant him the power of evil. Now get this. If there is such a thing as the power of evil being an accessible power, then why can't the power of love be an accessible power? Well, I believe it is. We've seen this with Sommers. His thorns can use love as a power source to make his thorns grow stronger. So in Elbaf, we get introduced to the struggle between the power of love and the power of evil. Light versus dark, just like the Reversi game. So I believe the why of this theory has to do with Sanji possibly being the first to show us how to overcome a Domi Reversi with the power of love, which I personally think is a variant of Conqueror's Haki. So okay, why is the sword so important to this idea? Well, I believe that's the most fun part of the theory. See, becoming a swordsman goes against everything Sanji believes in, as I've said, but it's also a part of himself that he's suppressing from his childhood, as well as his regular usage of a chef's knife. So despite Sanji never actually using a sword, there's a small part of him that feels natural with a sharp object. This is important because of how the Domi Reversi works. As we can see with Dory and Broggy, their personalities are still kind of intact. Even as we examine their motivations to take down Ja Rule, it's because he has grown old as a warrior and they need to take over. So what I'm saying here is Domi Reversi distorts your real personality but leaves in significant character parts of it, a part of you that tethers to your very soul. Now with this in mind, let's look back at the statement Sanji makes about a kitchen knife being the very soul of a chef. I believe evil Sanji will twist this principle so that the knife now represents a sword, the very same sword we see conveniently placed on his back on Elbaf. That's why it's so important that this narratively snowballs into him taking the sword and finally using it. Sanji has to control that part of his personality before he's able to overcome the Domi Reversi, because the power of love also calls for the power of self-love. Sanji has to accept the two sides of his personality and unite his ambition into one single mind. He must confront his inner swordsman within himself that he hates. That represents the childhood trauma, that represents his soul as a chef, and that also represents his rivalry with Zoro as a swordman. That's why Sanji's narrative journey to unlock Conquerors and defeat the Domi Reversi will involve him finally and temporarily becoming a swordsman. That's the theory, guys. Hope you enjoyed listening and watching like always. I think this is a cool idea and I would love a Domi Reversi Sanji even if it's for a moment. And I would love to see Sanji use a sword even if it's for a moment. Yep, so that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed the theory like always. Like and subscribe and look forward to more middleweight theories. Middleweight out.